these conversations is a lot of times what you end up telling them is every single thing that they're paid to do is just no good for society. And eventually it's like, you can't tell them, well, why don't you respect rights a little bit more here or there? It's like, you know how hard it is to be like an Oath Keeper cop? And I mean, that doesn't stop me from going to the Manch PD and filling up their little pamphlet shelves with Oath Keeper lit all the time. But I mean, what are they going to do? Just stop doing the job that they're paid to do because, you know, it violates our rights? It's kind of it's easier to outreach to ex-cops than it is to current cops.
Well, I noticed it, like, you know, if they have a training officer and all of a sudden he's by himself for the first time since he's been there, you can have a decent conversation with him for an hour. Wait 6 months after that and you can see the evolution change in his brain. And they're totally different from the first time you talk to them when they first started on the force. It's amazing.
Get them while they're young.
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing, you just mentioned Oath Keepers. I believe a few days ago, the main Facebook page for Oath Keepers totally trashed on Cop Block. It was kind of funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that push and pull. Although, I mean, my point of view is if the Oath Keepers were in control, so to speak, there wouldn't be a Cop Block. You know, it's just from police screwing up and trampling all over the rights. Now, I'm not defending everything that law enforcement's allowed to do by the Constitution.
Because some of that ain't so great either.
Yeah, some of that ain't so great either. But if they did stick to that, there probably wouldn't be a Cop Block. Like, they wouldn't be bad enough so people actually cared to spend a lot of time, effort, money, and personal risk to fight the police state if it wasn't so bad. And so, I mean, that's the constant challenge when you're trying to outreach to groups who are, you know, sort of trying to tone down police abuse, but you're coming from a completely they're all bad kind of perspective. It's really hard to like try to find common ground. And sometimes, like, when I see a lot of stuff going, like, if you read a lot of stuff that like Cop Block puts out, it's pretty deep stuff. Like, it's pretty hardcore. You have to be ready to be able to stomach some of that. I mean, sometimes I have a lot of friends on the right, on the conservative side, and they're all for rights and Constitution and things like that. And then they like the Cop Block page on my suggestion, and then after a while they just like, what's wrong with these guys? Oh, they hate America or something? And it's like, no, dude, you haven't been in here long enough. You just give it time. You're going to start, you know, your objections to stuff are going to go down and down and down when you just realize, you know. And also, I mean, whenever they're pulled over by a law enforcement agent, is ever trying to comply or give them any ground? It's always the opposite. It's always trying to say, how can I get out of this fine? How can I get them to leave me alone? How can I just not cooperate in any way and get away with it? That's kind of, even regular people, so to speak, have that mindset. It's like, oh gosh, it's the cops, they're coming after me, just get them away.
I had a conversation sort of like that with a college kid one night. He's a criminal law and justice major, and he said, I'm not afraid of the cops, I think they're awesome, blah, 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 blah. And I asked him, I'm like, be honest, please be honest with me. When you see a cop behind you and you're doing 5 miles over the speed limit, what are you thinking? He says, I get nervous. I'm like, see, you shouldn't be nervous. Why should you be nervous? He's afraid of him. In the back of his mind, he knows something bad's going to happen to him. I'm like, that's exactly how you're not supposed to think.
Yeah, and I mean, my great-grandmother ran a restaurant in Philadelphia, and she used to always offer cop discounts and always have cops around, things like that, because that would make it easier to actually keep her place secure, because there would be always cops around and be harder to rob, etc. And now, can you imagine trying that today? It's
like paying off the mob.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that, but you know, now imagine that today. You welcome, oh hey, friendly neighborhood officer, come into my home and, you know, maybe smell weed somewhere, and then I'm screwed. You know, I mean, it's like you can't, especially like post-drug war, you can't really, you don't want to deal with the cops on a personal, jovial kind of basis.
The fake drug war.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the war on us. We'll call it that instead.
The war on us.
I forgot where I was going to go with that. So, why don't you tell us some of like your most memorable experiences that you've had Because you guys have had, especially in Manchester, has had the massive checkpoint
Oh yeah.
Groups.
A couple of these have been like 50 or so people out there cop blocking in one spot.
When I went out, there was at least 40.
Yeah, it was a huge group, and part of the thing that I like to do, because usually the street corners are well enough staffed with people holding signs diverting traffic away from the checkpoints, warning them. And so usually if it's well staffed enough, I'll go out with a couple other people. We'll hit all the bars and talk to all the bartenders and say, hey, just so you know, there's a checkpoint in Bridge Street. Tell your patrons they might give you an extra tip. And just keep on going, hitting all the bars like that. And then on one of those times, one of the bar patrons was like, oh yeah, they're doing that. Half of Manchester's out there protesting the cops right now. And I'm like, sweet, that was one big memorable thing, was just the people see that it's like half of, it's a huge movement. And we have about a 98% or so positive response rate from those checkpoints. There's always the one or two grumpy old guy who's like, oh, get a job, or, do you want people to die drunk driving? Or there's always a couple, but far and wide, everyone's just like, you guys are heroes. There's people like trying to throw money at us, trying to give us free pizza, high fives, fist, like all the time. And so it's an interesting environment, because like the cops are just sort of on the defensive. They're just sort of sitting there quietly trudging on with their job, and then it's like we own the night kind of thing.
Right. And for all the people who are watching at home, if you have ever been to a checkpoint protest and you didn't have 40 people, you probably are not living in New
Or
Hampshire.
driving through
Exactly.
one without a camera when you run a cop block radio show.
I'm gonna smack you.
Yeah.
That's a long story. I think I talked about that last year.
That's
You can go to
that's
last
a
year's.
memorable moment.
That was a memorable
That's a
moment.
memorable. Why don't you talk about that?
Oh.
It's a good lesson.
All right. So
Yeah. But the memorable part was, this is kind of a recent
get it,
thing
Graham.
that we've managed to get the whole checkpoint activism to such a high level, because when my first time I was starting, we had a pretty good turnout, like 20, 30 people maybe, and maybe about 20. And so we got at some stoplight, some person was honking, hey, I love what you guys are doing. I really love what you guys are doing. Where can I find out more? So I walked into the crosswalk, which, by the way, the walk signal was on at the time, and passed her out a little cop block thing. And as soon as I got back to the sidewalk, two cops converged on me and tried to arrest me for jaywalking. You could tell they were just like waiting for an excuse to shut someone down and intimidate us. Unfortunately, it was all on camera, and so by several cameras. And at the end, they just gave up. And I remember they were sitting there nervously twitching on their radios, and they said, what do we do, over? And finally they just said, let you off the warning, and just like took off. They mumbled something, and they haven't tried anything since, because they know now.
who gets jaywalking tickets?
Apparently people trying to stand up for other rights. They'll
Wow.
get, just like the whole Al Capone tax evasion thing, they'll get you for whatever they can, even if it's not what they really want you for.
It's bullcrap. My memorable moment probably is the whole one of the cops here used to be the lacrosse team coach for Keene State College, but also is a cop on a bike in the same area with all of his students. One of his students came up to me and punched me numerous times, and both of us, he had a view on his camera and I had a view on mine, while he was sitting there watching it happen. Didn't do a thing. That was the most memorable moment. After that, there was a 7-minute video of me chasing him on his 7-minute video. It's on Keene Cop Block Raw. I was chasing him for 7 minutes straight, heckling the crap out of him. You're a lacrosse team coach, you're a conflict of interest, you're a coward. You're a coward, acting upon an assault on your own lacrosse teammate.
I'm surprised
straight.
I
It
did
sounds like,
not
yeah,
hurt
have a good
myself
time.
that night, because I was behind him giggling so much. I could barely control my bike. I thought I was going to wreck it at some point.
Ian Freeman was there that night. He was right next to me watching me heckle him for 7 minutes straight. I don't know.
It was funny.
It was a 3,000 something
Yeah.
views on that video. It was weird.
It was good.
But that's probably the most memorable moment. He got let go because I filed numerous complaints with the college. That's a conflict of interest, and through the NCAA. I wanted him out of there, so he's no longer an employee for the Keene State College, but he's still on the bike and passing out victimless crime for revenue purposes on the kids.
I can't win them all, huh?
No, but I do want to say, since Chris Cantwell came up, I was by myself a few weeks back, and it was it was a busy night. I think it was a Friday night. I'm getting surrounded by cops. It's like parties like every 5 feet, and I'm by myself. I'm like trying to get this stop and that stop, them going to this house. So I made a distress call, and twice already, he's the first one that came out to back me up.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's talked about it yet, but in Keene we use the two-way radios, and I got to say that of all the activism I've been involved in, I think that that's like the greatest thing that we've got going on here in Keene, is that there's the radio repeater at someone's house somewhere, and it makes it so easy for us to communicate in real time. And since Keene is sort of a small town, there's a whole lot going on in a really generally small vicinity. So while on occasion, personally, I might not want to, run around with a camera and film everybody who gets a drinking in public ticket, when there is a distress call, you get on the radio and people just come running pretty quickly. I have radio, I keep the radio on me at all times, and I also have radios on chargers on every floor of my house, so that whenever anything's going on, I'm able to respond to it.
Yeah, it could be 2 a.m. It could be 2 a.m. and the only one that responds is Chris.
Yeah, well, that's the one thing that the Manch activists seem to be lacking in. There's not a lot of radios around. So far, the only people that I know that have radios are myself and Rob Mathias, and I make sure to buy. I think bought like 3 of them off Pete Air. And so
I got 5. I got 5 of them in case some people want to help us. I got 5.
Yeah, well, we can't all be that special, I'm trying. I'm just trying to break in, just trying to get a new way of doing things, because sometimes during these whole cop block things, I've had to physically run down to different spots of the operation to convey messages or call people and hope that they can respond. But it's like there's got to be a better way.
Yeah, I think that's one problem that we had run into when we were up at the checkpoint in Walpole, is that the range isn't so great. So if you're trying to go radio to radio, you can't get that far. So I think that's one thing that needs to be solved, is like a portable friggin' repeater or something. I don't know.
Well, that was a memorable moment, because that was my first checkpoint that I ever did, and I think a lot to do with that whole situation with you driving through there and getting arrested. It was because of the radio mess up, and too many people were on it. Too many people were going over people and talking over, instead of talking about specific people at the checkpoint. They were talking about other things, and it was kind of like a hectic night. But I didn't even know you were going through, and then I'm waiting. I'm like, are we going home soon? And then it's like, he got arrested. I'm like, how long ago was that? That was 2.5 hours ago. You didn't see it? No, I was sitting right here. I didn't see Eric get arrested. Where the heck did that happen? So it was kind of a hectic night.
Yeah, I think it was lucky that I had, I don't know whose number I had on my phone. I think I only had one person's number in my phone, and I luckily called them, and they were out there with me, so they could pick me up from.
Oh, your wife wasn't happy.
That happens.
When she bailed you out, I'm like, I'm not worried about the cops. Is he coming back? I thought you were gonna go missing.
I heard you'd mentioned. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you mentioned the lack of phone numbers in your phone. I found very useful. I have the I'm Getting Arrested app on my phone, which is a thing that you hit a shortcut and it'll actually send out a mass text message. You have to put the numbers in ahead of time, so it assists in